You're listening to the Back Porch Talk podcast. Danny and Jason had many discussions and debates on the back porch while making pivotal investment moves with assets. That's right, with trading cards. They welcome you to the back porch and right into those discussions about current sports news with a fresh and unique twist. So come on and join us. Welcome to the Back Porch Talk podcast. I'm your co-host, Jason.
It's your co-host, Danny.
Fans, we got a great show for you today. We'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl, and we'll get into NBA All-Star Weekend. But first, Danny, right into the Super Bowl, and where the Kansas City Chiefs prevail 38-35 over the Philadelphia Eagles. I think I had this in reverse fashion. Knew it was going to be close. Thought the Eagles were going to win by 3, but it was kind of switched around here. Patrick Mahomes goes for 182 yards, 3 touchdowns, named Super Bowl MVP. Jalen Hurts had a great game here, with the exception of that fumble that was returned for a touchdown, which proved to be very critical. But nonetheless, he goes for 304 yards and 1 touchdown. And 3 touchdowns, 1 touchdown passing, 3 touchdowns rushing. He rushed for 15 times for 70 yards. Danny, Jalen Hurts had a game for you, man, with the exception of that fumble.
Mm-hmm.
You got to give props to the Kansas City Chiefs. The call, I'll just put it like that, by the refs, the holding call that ultimately allowed for the Chiefs to get down deep into Eagles territory and eventually hits the game-winning field goal. Danny, I don't think you call that in the Super Bowl, man. You kidding me? There's been more holding calls, egregious holding calls that we have not seen called. And to see this call in a Super Bowl, was it a hold? Yeah, I mean, it was a hold, but it wasn't like a hold. Did the referees get this right, Danny?
He had to make the call, man. If he doesn't call it, it's going to be on the other side from the Kansas City perspective of why didn't he call it? So they're in a no-win situation from that play perspective. It's tough to make that call. I totally agree with that, man. At the end of the game, for it to come down to the way it came down, you had an awesome Super Bowl game. And for a call like that to happen, but Bradbury did admit he did hold. People got to remember, man, granted it comes down to that play, but what led up to it? And that was Philadelphia's defense fell apart in the second half.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where you stop them. Before that, it may not come down to that play. You hate to see them lose like that. Like I said, the Super Bowl was everything I was expecting and more from how it came out. So, but from the play perspective, yeah, it's tough to call. But he doesn't make the call, then Kansas City has a gripe.
Yeah, true. But man, I hated that it ended like that. This was a good game. I would say this too, speaking of Super Bowl halftime performances. The day of the Super Bowl, Danny, I usually watch some of my favorite halftime performances just to be reminded of how great halftime shows can be. Mm-hmm. And the one that I always go to the Prince halftime show with, of course, my beloved alma mater, the FAMU Marching 100, alongside of Prince, one of my all-time favorites. And then also I look at Dr. Dre and the rest of the crew. He had Snoop Dogg, Mary J. You had 50 Cent. You had, you had everybody in that one. I watched Bruno Mars with Beyonce. And so, Danny, I was really looking forward to the halftime show with Rihanna, which was visually great in terms of just kind of how the platforms and how they were all in the sky and just the dance moves and being in sync and everything. And at first I thought that, she would bring somebody else on, but I mean, she has a plethora of songs, a plethora of hits, and where she just did it by herself and everything. And she showcased, obviously, the fact that she is uh, carrying a child. She is pregnant, and her team confirmed that afterwards. So I give her great kudos for performing while pregnant and everything. So I think it was a good overall Super Bowl. Again, I just hated that it had to end with that call
Yep.
he made, but Kansas City is here to stay. The AFC is wicked. The AFC is tough. We'll see if they make a return to the big game. The Eagles, the NFC is not as strong, Danny. I think the Eagles can still, make their way deep in the playoffs. So this is going to be interesting to see what happens next year. I think it's setting it up possibly for a rematch here, but we'll see. What say you?
Yeah, Jay, man, it was tough for Philly the way they started, and they had Kansas City on the ropes in the first half,
Oh, most definitely.
and they didn't put their foot on their throat to take them out, and they let them stay in the game. And when we previewed this game, I said the one thing we didn't really know was Patrick Mahomes' injury status ahead of the game when we were talking about it initially. So he did come up hobbling. He took a hit, but then after halftime he bounced back, and Andy Reid made a ton of adjustments on the offensive end. Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid and that offense, and they ran two plays where those two walk-in touchdowns. And they mentioned that Jacksonville ran the same play against Philadelphia in week 4. And they executed the same exact play and got Philly, caught them sleeping where they couldn't do anything. And that momentum swung big time. But hey, Jalen Hurts, man, that was the tough part. It was a tough part to see him lose, man, because he had a heck of a game. I mean, a historic game.
Yeah.
And it was tough to see either one lose, honestly, because like I said, Pat Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, I was cheering for both of them and just cheering for a good game. But yeah, Jalen Hurts had a heck of a game. And yeah, Philadelphia, as long as they keep all their pieces together and stay healthy, because with football, there's those statistics where teams that make the Super Bowl the next year don't make it, and for whatever reason. So if they stay healthy and they keep those lines together and maybe bring another piece in on the defensive end, I don't see anyone stopping them. They have it all set up for them to make it, but the NFL, man, things change on the dime and some pieces move here and there, and that could put that in jeopardy. But all in all, great Super Bowl. Rihanna did her thing. I was hoping she would bring Jay-Z out, honestly. Yeah. I think a couple other people say that too, but I was hoping she would bring him out. But she did her thing, and great Super Bowl overall.
Right. Now, let me just add to last year's performance included Eminem and also Kendrick Lamar, who was also in it as well. And the combination of Bruno Mars and Beyonce was actually headlined by Coldplay. So just wanted to make sure we include everybody in on this. So want no blowback. Now, Danny, on to the NBA, where this past weekend, NBA All-Star Weekend happened. It was interesting. One of the things that we always worry about is how good will Saturday night be? Let me just say this, Danny. I think one of the things that I really noticed in this particular NBA All-Star Weekend in Salt Lake City, Utah, was the fact that the stars of the stars weren't there. That to me says a lot. So even though typically some of the players are hurt, they would still go to NBA All-Star Weekend.
Yep.
Uh, Steph wasn't there. Clay wasn't there. I mean, there were a few other All-Stars who were hurt who did not show up at All-Star Weekend. So what does that say about the All-Star game being in Salt Lake City, Utah? I think that speaks volumes, quite frankly. And I just say that to say this All-Star Weekend, it just felt different. It didn't feel like that normal buzz, the normal hoopla that usually is generated. And yeah, I just think, there's something to be mindful of for the NBA moving forward. The game on Sunday night where Team Giannis, Team LeBron, they faced off, and it was a different format in that they tried to do a playground style where they picked the teams before actually playing the game. Giannis, he actually got injured the couple games or a couple nights before when they played with the Bulls. Turns out Giannis has a sprained ligament in his wrist. So he only played like a minute, scored 2 points, and sat out. LeBron ended up injuring himself throughout the course of the game. He goes in, does what he does, gets injured, and then he sits out the rest of the game. The stars of the stars weren't there, man. It just seemed like a lackluster All-Star game, Danny. Team Giannis did break in with a win here, 184-175, to give Team LeBron their first loss. LeBron's first loss as a GM, if you will. Jason Tatum scores an All-Star game record of 55 points, becomes the MVP. Danny, I watched a little bit of this thing, man, this back and forth. First of all, it took way too long for them to pick teams. NBA needs to do something about that. If they're going to have this particular format, it just took forever to pick the teams. You can look at social media or whatever, but people were saying the same thing. I was like, when are they going to just finish this up and get back to warming up? Because that's a long period of maybe warming up, not warming up, picking a team, having to re-warm up. I mean, that's just a lot going on there, Danny.
Yep.
So I think that's something that the NBA would need to, rectify. The game itself, man, there's no defense played. It wasn't competitive at all. It just was so lackluster, man. And it got to a point where I just stopped watching, quite frankly. I usually watch the All-Star game. I just couldn't watch this, man. What say you about the game, Danny?
From the actual game perspective, totally agree. I think the Kobe Bryant MVP award, right? How did Kobe Bryant play in the All-Star game? He took it like any other game.
Right.
He played hard. He played defense. And it's one of those things where, now, don't get me wrong, man. It hit like Tatum in that third quarter. It hit what he is, even with no one in his face. He was just nailing threes. That's not easy to do. So in years past, even recently, where there was some defense and actually some intensity, where they actually cared, but it was, the NBA has some changes to make here. And as far as the picking part, they should do that on Saturday. If they're going to do it like that, do it on Saturday. I don't understand why they changed it from what they used to do on Thursday night on TNT ahead of it. They bring the captains on where you usually get KD.
Yeah.
When it was KD and LeBron, KD sit there mugging TNT, the crew, but making his picks. But do it that way, man, because that was way too long. And I think they're missing the boat on who's actually consuming this. It's not necessarily the adults, it's the kids. And for that thing to start as late as it did for kids on the East Coast, you got to stay up late to watch that. You have to
crazy.
bump it back or do it like back in the day where it was like an afternoon or something.
It was
I don't know.
afternoon. Yeah. Yep.
So, but they got to remember who the core audience is in this game, and it's the kids and the teenagers. So they have a lot to go back to the drawing board on after this weekend because
Yeah. Yeah.
they just need to work through. Do we do a game? Because if everyone's out there and they're saying they don't want to get hurt or whatever the case may be, what do you do instead of like Saturday night? Saturday night represented. There's a lot of question marks around the slam dunk contest. Mac McClung saved that from what his performance. The 3-point contest, Dame did his thing. Skills competition, Utah Jazz representatives did their thing. So Saturday night was cool. Slam dunk was like, yeah, at first when you found out who was participating, just because they're not household names. But the All-Star game, they got to figure that out because no need to drag people through that again next year. But if they're not going to play defense, they have to play some semblance of defense. No one's saying out to go out there like you in the playoff run and playing defense, but at least put a hand up.
Danny, I think the NBA All-Star Weekend, it's always going to be from here on out. You're going to have a great Saturday, but an off Sunday or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recall last time where both days were great.
Agree.
It's been a while. The NBA has done some modifications to the Sunday game, in terms of one ponying up money for charities.
Yep.
Winning each quarter for the charities or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else they would do, quite honestly. Is that in the CBA agreement? I just don't know. I mean, I think that has to come from the captains. Whoever the captains are has to, really captain and lead.
I think it's that, Jason. I just think it's the elder statesman stars too, though. That has to bring that down, like a LeBron, for example, or like if Steph was there. That has to come from them because they have to kind of lead the way for the younger generation to say, "Hey, man, this isn't what's up." Like Jaylen Brown spoke out, so some players did speak out about it.
Hey, the coach spoke out.
Martin Malone spoke out about
it. He spoke out. He's like, "Man, what in the world?" So something's got to be done.
Yeah, you'd hate to see it go away, but after this weekend, it's going to be tough to defend it unless some drastic changes occur from a competitive standpoint.
Not only that, man, the fans who purchased tickets for that, man, I wonder how much those tickets really were. Either way, man, it's an All-Star weekend. It's going to be expensive. And so for that hard-earned money, those dollars to go to see something like that, man. I mean,
and just think of the cities like Milwaukee is trying to get in, like for 2025, 2026. From that standpoint, you want the game to stick around. You want these things to stick around because that's a revenue generator for the city. And just have the All-Star game in Milwaukee. Just thing is not and next year I think it's in Indiana. I think it's in Indianapolis. But it brings some eyes to the small market teams as well, outside of like if Milwaukee has a playoff run or whatever. But to have that in a city generate the buzz and the revenue, you want to keep it going and you want to keep it at a high level. So they got to fix it, man. So some of these smaller markets can benefit from having it show up in their city. Be able to be access to see some of these stars all in a collective area at one time.
Well, I think to that point, though, I think people and fans will come to the city to celebrate, but to go to the games and go to the events, that's the question.
That's what I mean. You got to have a draw. You got to have a
draw, man. And I think in those small market cities, that price point is going to have to come down. If you want to fill the stands, the price point is going to have to come down, which means a loss in revenue. already. So this is a interesting situation that the NBA finds themselves in. It's going to be interesting to see how they adjust the All-Star weekend, but they're going to have to do something after this past weekend's performance. And again, I don't know if it was this Utah or what. I just don't know. And I feel like this too, Danny. The players, they obviously go to each city. They obviously know Utah. So the fact that some of these players didn't want to come to Utah says a whole lot, man. It says a whole lot. It hasn't been, the NBA All-Star Weekend hasn't been in Utah in 30 years. It was good to see Karl Malone and John Stockton being kind of headlined in NBA All-Star Weekend. But yeah, NBA's got to do something about this.
Thank you for joining us at Back Porch Talk Podcast. You can also join us on Twitter by tweeting us at @back_podcast. For more information, you can go to our website, which is backporchtalkpodcast.com. You can also email us at backporchtalkpodcast@gmail.com. Again, thank you for joining us, and remember that there's enough hate in the world, so go ahead and spread a little love.